Hey, Nico here. So I've been just having a look over these desert rose plants, and as a cursory view, one might think, oh, they are all the same. However, there are minute differences that then tend to be able to separate out one species from the next here. So what we actually have is three species, or two species at least, one hybrid species, and then other hybrids within the group, essentially. The flowers is a more traditional way of being able to use a characteristic of a plant to tell it apart from another related plant. Now, with the flowers of the desert roses, they are very, very similar. Yeah, difference in size and color, but that isn't just, generally indicative of it being something different. More modern ways in terms of telling species apart relies not just on flowers, but also on other characteristics that plants might have. So here we have an obesum hybrid, Adenium Obesum hybrid. And these ones have been bred for having bigger flowers, usually more colorful flowers into the reds, and even purples and whites and yellows as they've been going for. These guys generally tend to have smooth leaves, very shiny as well. Large, they can be quite almost round, but they are not usually very long. Then we can move on to something like the Adenium Arabicum, and we have these coming back here as well as these ones here, which tend to have more glaucous leaves, things that have kind of like a matte color to them. And if you were able to actually feel them, they actually have a very fine pubescence, very fine hairiness to these leaves. And that's a very good indicator in terms of the Adenium Arabicum plants or hybrids that have derived from these plants as well. Finally, then kind of at the back here, we have Adenium Somaliensis. Now this one, it has these generally narrow, very almost like grass-like leaves that are coming off of the stems. And the flowers, again, very similar to the others. They tend to be slightly a little darker in color, but the flower color, again, is not indicative of a species. But these very narrow and long leaves is a good indicator of Somaliensis. And then what we have here in front of it is actually a hybrid between the Somaliensis and one of the other types. I'm not exactly sure which. But you can see it's got some of the more smaller, narrower leaves of the Somaliensis in it, with the veins that are a little bit more visible, but they tend to be shorter and a little bit more wavy. So my guess is that it's actually hybridized with our indigenous desert rose here in Zambia, Adenium multiflorus, because the flower is also a little bit of an indication. The flower on our indigenous one is white in the center here with kind of reddish or pinkish edging. And this flower is very similar to our indigenous one, but the leaves are a little bit more of a giveaway on that. As for form, most of these are shorter plants, whereas our indigenous one can get up to 2.5, maybe even 3 meters tall. And although it does form a swollen stem base, it takes a bit longer to do that. These are all shorter plants, with something like the Arabicums forming what almost looks like a miniature baobab. The base of the plants is very swollen, and then you get these shorter, stubbier branches that come off. And over time, they can get to some height. Whereas things like the Obesum and the Somaliensis will form their swollen roots down below ground, and when you expose the root system, then you tend to notice those swollen aspects of the roots and the lower stem much more, comparatively to the Arabicum, which as it starts to grow, you see the caudex start to increase in size, the stem increase in size as these little stem branches come off of it. All right, so kind of to sum up, when we are looking at identifying a plant, we usually take into account not just the flowers, but also leaf characteristics, stem or growth characteristics, and even habitat sometimes, which will help to dictate what one species might be from another, or one type of plant might be from another.